Thanks so much, Jonathan. So yeah, thank you all for joining today. Really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully you're not going to get caught in this crazy weather that we're about to get hit with in New York. I'm Chris Mann. I'm the AVP of Policy and Advocacy at WIN. WIN is the largest provider of shelter and supportive housing for families with children in New York City. Um, I've been with WIN going on 5 years. I started out as a program director in supportive housing, and I've been doing the policy stuff here since 2022. So background in direct service work and more recently on the policy side. And I am joined today by Rhonda Jackson, who I have the pleasure of working closely with regularly, but I'll turn it over to Rhonda to quickly introduce herself.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rhonda Jackson. I am the New York City Homelessness Coalition. I am also the co-chair of the New York City Fund to End Youth and Family Homelessness. I've been with both organizations for about 5 years, and I'm excited to be with you guys today.
So today we're going to talk about the Housing Access Voucher Program. So some very exciting developments this year. Um, so after many years of advocating, we finally got the Housing Access Voucher Program in the New York State budget. It's something that was not an easy feat. It's also not enough, but a step in the right direction. So we're going to talk about, what this means for the housing landscape in New York, and just, what advocacy is still left to do at this point. So just to kind of level set in terms of what the Housing Access Voucher Program is, it's a housing voucher that's very similar to Section 8. So it's essentially just modeled on the Section 8 program where someone gets a housing voucher, they find an apartment in the community, and they pay 30% of their income towards the rent, and the voucher covers the rest. So it makes housing that would be otherwise completely unaffordable affordable to the voucher holder. It's a little bit different than Section 8 in that it's slightly more flexible. It's available to folks regardless of immigration status or criminal justice history. So there's a little bit more flexibility. Section 8, for instance, has immigration requirements, and it also is not open to people with certain criminal justice backgrounds. The voucher is also available to folks that are making less than 50% AMI. So for a family of three in New York City, that would be around $70,000, like I think around $72,000 a year. So it's a voucher that is available very broadly, and has, pretty flexible eligibility requirements. So it's something that we've been advocating for years, but I think it's particularly important in this moment, given the situation that we're up against. So obviously, there are a number of cuts proposed to housing services at the federal level. So the reconciliation bill obviously cut SNAP and Medicaid. And now, as we go through the appropriations process, the that's where a lot of the housing services are. That in President Trump's skinny budget, he recommended cutting HUD by 44%, and HUD pays for Section 8, Section 9. So housing voucher, those federal housing vouchers. So if the federal, like if Trump's skinny budget were allowed to go through, you would see huge, devastating cuts to Section 8 in New York, something that we already don't have enough of. So as it stands now, because Section 8 is not an entitlement program, only about a quarter of people that are eligible for it actually are able to access it. That's why, when the Section 8 wait list opened up for the first time in years, around like 600,000 people applied within 6 days. So we know that there's this massive need for housing vouchers because New York is so incredibly unaffordable. Um, and sadly, what's happening at the federal level is not the expansion that we need, but in fact cuts. This is against the backdrop of record homelessness. So the comptroller put out a report this year that I believe found like around 160,000 people experienced homelessness last year in New York, which is just an unreal number. So many people experiencing homelessness in New York, and so given the backdrop of the federal cuts, it was more important than ever that the state legislature acted and passed the Housing Access Voucher Program to help fill some of the gaps that are going to be created. So it's not going to fill every gap. The cuts that we're talking about on the federal level are very large. Even just the emergency housing vouchers alone, which were essentially like an emergency Section 8 voucher that was passed during the American Rescue Plan during COVID, created about 10,000 vouchers. And those vouchers were used throughout the state. And unfortunately, those vouchers look like they're not going to be refunded. So the markup for the House and the Senate appropriations do not include funding for the emergency housing voucher. And so that's where something like HAVP can help kind of offset some of those cuts because it's creating this state level program. So next, I'm gonna just turn it over to Rhonda to talk about, what does this mean for families? What do vouchers mean? What are their impacts? So I'll throw it to you, Rhonda.
Thanks, Chris. So I just want to say that this 160,000 that was counted last year, it's just growing and it's growing nationwide. And these vouchers in New York, a lot of people are coming to New York because we are a sanctuary city. So my personal experience is that my daughter had come to New York through a domestic violence situation, and she had went into shelter. And I lost my family because she couldn't get a voucher. She couldn't get housing. She couldn't get assistance anywhere. And it was just really hard. I sound muffled. That's because I'm in my office, because I got a little people running around. And I don't know how to make it any better. Maybe if I got closer. I apologize for the muffledness. Is this better? I'll just hold my mic. Is this better?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So what I leave off with my daughter who couldn't get assistance and couldn't get housing. And so she ended up leaving New York with my grandchildren. And that made a real impact on my life because family is really important. And when people are in situations where they are unhoused or instably housed, they need supports, and family is really important. So what having a voucher means is stability, and it really means safety. And having a stable home will help children have consistent schooling. Because it's really hard going from shelter to shelter or not knowing where you're going to be able to rest your head or being promised a voucher and not being able to find housing. So it means stability. It means prevention of trauma. No, because especially with children, I work with families with children, and I consistently hear about how their children are reverting back to maybe like if it's a 6-year-old, right? They're reverting back to like 3-year-old behavior and things like that. And this is something that if children don't have stable housing or stable schooling or good support, that they will actually carry through life. So having a voucher means things that families who are fleeing violence even, have a place. And it also means dignity and autonomy, which is what we in this field are consistently striving for. We say that we're working towards equity and autonomy, and it allows a family to choose to live and regain control of their lives. And I truly apologize for not being able to, you not hearing me. Okay, Chris, back to you.
Thanks so much, Rhonda. And yeah, I think we could hear you quite a bit better when you were closer to the mic like that. So thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. Really appreciate you sharing that. Um, so, we also wanted to talk about what worked, right? So, um, obviously getting any kind of new programs and new money in the state budget is a challenge. And I think the fight to get HAVP provides a good template for other advocacy efforts moving forward. So I'll just start out by saying that this took years of advocacy. I think the first version of the bill was introduced in 2020. Um, the the sponsors of the bill, Senator Kavanaugh is the housing chair on the Senate side, and Assemblymember Rosenthal is the housing chair on the Assembly side. And so they've both been at this for years. Wynn, in our role, has also been at this for years, and I think what the biggest thing that helped us get over the finish line this year was just the years of organizing and coalition building that really led to having some real political power that swayed both the legislature and also the governor. So we were able to build a really broad coalition. I think first and foremost, like this idea is, the need for a state level housing voucher was not particularly controversial. Most folks in the legislature agreed. We had a ton of sponsors in the legislature, and we've had a ton of sponsors in the legislature for years. It's just kind of getting them to put the political capital on the line to be able to push it over the finish line. And that really took a broad coalition of folks on the outside applying pressure. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we applied pressure, and I'll also have Rhonda talk a little bit about an op-ed that she penned that I think was really, really powerful and helped help do that. So first and foremost, like the coalition building when, I would say 3 years ago when Wynn started to get really involved in advocating for the Housing Access Voucher Program, there was a very small group of folks that were really advocating for HAVP. So the coalition that eventually became Housing Access New York started with just 5 organizations. And so through organizing, we were able to kind of solidify the structure, solidify the coalition, and bring coalition members in. And I think what's really powerful about Housing Access New York, the coalition, is just the broad interests that are represented there. So we have groups from local New York to REBNY, and working with Housing Justice for All, right? So if you know anything about housing in New York, you know that REVNY and Housing Justice for All are not exactly the best of friends. So to have them both together, working together to one on one goal was really powerful. It's really powerful to be in a room with a legislator and have a representative from REVNY and have a representative from Vocal or Housing Justice for All, so that they can really kind of understand the breadth of the coalition. And then obviously, folks with lived experience were essential to advocating for this and uplifting their stories about the need for vouchers and also you know what uh, what vouchers actually mean for them. So, Rhonda, I'm wondering if now you could just talk a little bit about the op-ed that you penned and kind of the angle of that. Seems like maybe Rhonda is frozen. Rhonda, are you still there? Okay. Well, Rhonda, once your internet is back in, um, once Rhonda rejoins, I'll throw it back over to her. But a couple kind of key things that really worked on the advocacy side. Um, so, you know, op-eds I think are critical, ensuring that the right people get the right message. And so I'll let Rhonda kind of talk through that a little bit more. Another thing that was really powerful this year was the CPRAC, the Child Poverty Reduction Advisory Council. This was a council brought together by the governor. So this is the governor's own council that was tasked with making recommendations for reducing child poverty by half. And so they put together a slate of recommendations. One of those recommendations was a statewide housing voucher program as critical to reducing child poverty in the state of New York. And so we really took that and ran with it, right? So, like, again, this is the governor's own council saying that if you want to achieve the goal that you're saying that you want to achieve, then creating some kind of statewide housing voucher program is a really effective way to reducing child poverty. So we really leveraged that in our messaging. We really, targeted that messaging at the governor to say, your own council is advocating for a program like this. We have a ton of support in the legislature. It seems like everyone supports this program except you. And so we did a lot of targeting to try and get the governor on board. And eventually she did come around. There's also, the importance of writing reports and having really strong data. So one of the things that we did at WIN, we put out a report in 2024 where we estimated the effects of the Housing Access Voucher Program on different parts of the state. So hey, Rhonda, are you back?
Oh, I'm
Hey.
here. Hey.
Perfect. Well, we can hear you great. So I was just talking about reports, but I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the op-ed that you wrote and the messaging there.
Okay. So I appealed to Governor Hochul because as a mother and a grandmother, I just felt that she would understand what a parent feels if their whole, if their lifeline was broken. And I just told her about how my daughter had, like I was talking earlier, about how my daughter had come to New York from a domestic violence system that she was fleeing from. And she went into PATH and she got um, temporary shelter. But what had happened is she applied for an emergency voucher. I believe it was emergency voucher. We were looking for an apartment. We had placed the children in school in a community that we thought we were, living in. And as it happened, she was denied. Um, I don't know if it was landlord discrimination. I don't know, really don't know what the bottom line was, but she was denied. And when I wrote the op-ed, I just suggested to Governor Hochul that as a grandparent, how would she feel if it was her grandchild that was being uprooted from their family, from their friends, from their school, from any support in the community? And it looked like it may have hit her ears. And look at where we now. We got this 50 million. It's not a lot, but it's a start. And I'm just really thankful, that City Limits gave me the opportunity to write that article and she heard it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Rhonda. And I think that was one of the things that I was noting is that, the governor was um really opposed to the Housing Access Voucher Program and had been opposed to it for years and years. And every year the legislature would say, it's not us. We all support this. It's really the governor. And there was some truth to that, right? The governor was absolutely opposed to the Housing Access Voucher Program, and it did take very targeted messaging at the governor, like Rhonda's op-ed, that I think really did move her to come around. But it also took the folks in the legislature really pushing, right? So, I think one aspect that is hard, when you're an advocate is you're not in the room. You're not there for the three-way negotiation between, he's the ASC and the governor. But in order for this to get passed, the governor is not going to bring this to the table, right? It really did take the legislature making this a real priority in those three-way negotiations and raising it at that table. And so, you know, although we did have, our champions in the legislature, we did a lot of advocating with individual folks in the legislature to make sure that they were raising this up with leadership. And we were persistent. Some would say pestering, but that's I think sometimes what it takes, right? They're always going to tell you they're bringing it up and that it's important, but really kind of laying that pressure on there as well, to ensure that they're putting their political capital on the line to get this across the finish line was, I think, also really essential. And we know that eventually they did raise it at the table, and because of the work that had been done with the governor as well, she was more receptive to that. So just in terms of what 50 million gets us, we were advocating for 250 million, which even still would not be enough, right? So there's just such a tremendous amount of need in New York State. We need many more vouchers to really truly end homelessness in the state. But again, as Rhonda said, it's a foot in the door, right? It gets us a program that we didn't have before, another tool in our toolbox to be able to address homelessness. And so $50 million gets us approximately 2,500 vouchers over the next 4 years, right? So again, this is just a start. This is just year one of the program. But it's funding to ensure that, 2,500 households that wouldn't have vouchers are able to get them. So probably about 1,400 to 1,500 of those vouchers will go to New York City, and the rest will be spread out across the state. The reason I have this regional breakdown of cost burdened households is because that's how the formula works to distribute the vouchers across the state. So areas that have the highest level of rent burden get the most vouchers. And so the vouchers will be distributed across the state based on um, the level of need, based on the rent burden in those areas. Um, so the program will first start rolling out in March of 2026. Um, this was a key um, sticking point at the end as we were negotiating kind of the final details of what would actually be in the budget. The governor had pushed for implementation in June of 2026 and just 2 years of vouchers. And so we really pushed hard, and our champions in the legislature really pushed hard against that. And we're able to move up implementation date and also extend the time that the vouchers are available to an individual from 2 years to 5 years. So again, it's a foothold, it's a start. Certainly, we are going to continue to advocate. Um, so that's where you all come in, right? So we will be back next year, right? Just because we got the victory and got, the program, you know, got the program rolling, there's still lots and lots of work to do. So we have to advocate for more money, right? So, I think, um, you know, 50 million gets us around 2,500 vouchers. If we were to get 250 million, that's around 13,000 vouchers throughout the state. And so, we hope to grow that to really make this a strong tool for um, being able to really address homelessness. Another thing that I forgot to mention that I should have said before is that the Housing Access Voucher Program can be used for both um, helping people move out of shelter, but also helping people stay in apartments that they're currently in. So it can be used to stabilize people or to move people out of shelter into permanent housing. So that's another level of flexibility that's really critical. We know that if we can keep people in housing, then they're not going to end up in shelter. They're not going to be, they don't have to face the trauma of homelessness. And the apartments that they're in now are going to be cheaper than the apartment that they're going to have to find later on if they become homeless, go into the shelter, and then have to find new housing on their own. So a key piece of advocacy for the next year is implementation. So this is, there are a lot of questions about, how do we make sure that this is implemented correctly? There's a lot in the bill as it's written to ensure that implementation happens in a way that makes sense. So the um, the vouchers will go through the public housing authorities. So in New York City, through HPD and NYCHA, and then through the public housing authorities in the different parts of the state. And the thinking there is because the public housing authorities are already set up to utilize these vouchers, to utilize Section 8, and it'll look very similar to Section 8 for them. So they'll be able to do that. But we have to, make sure that the vouchers are actually rolled out when they're supposed to. So starting in March 2026. So this year is really critical for us to advocate to make sure that they're doing their due diligence and putting all of laying all the groundwork to be able to easily roll out the vouchers once it's time, so that on March 2026 they can flip the switch and everything rolls out seamlessly. So that's the hope, but to get there, it will require a lot of advocacy. So One call that I'll make to this group, and I know Jonathan will put this in the chat, is we need more folks to join Housing Access New York. It's a coalition of more than 70 groups from around the state that have been fighting for the Housing Access Voucher Program. So we got this big win this year, but that group continues to meet every month to talk through implementation and make sure that we're getting our questions answered, asking the right questions of, uh, you know, government leaders that are actually implementing this, and making sure that it's implemented the right way. And Rhonda, do you want to talk about the Human Right to Housing Coalition?
So the Human Rights Housing Coalition is a group of people. We have a listening session in August, I believe. I don't know how you're going to get the link. And you could just get involved that way so that we can be with the rest of the advocates that are out here fighting for families to get housed. Um, Families, we're not statistics in a tracker or on a piece of paper or just data. We are people who need to guarantee, and as advocates, people who need to guarantee that every family, every elder, every child, that no family goes unhoused in what, the wealthiest city in America. So we really need to get together to give that support. It's the human right to housing that is banding together to get a coalition or a group of people that will fight and will advocate for families and people that are homeless. Yeah.
Thanks, Rhonda. So yeah, those are two coalitions that folks can get involved in. So the Housing Access New York link that Jonathan dropped in the chat, if you go to that link, you can sign up there. There's not a huge commitment requirement or anything like that. Like you can be as involved or not involved as you have the capacity to be. But it's just, I think, really powerful to grow that coalition and to have, as diverse level of stakeholders as possible. So would really encourage you to join. Would love for folks to get involved in helping to ensure that um, the vouchers are implemented correctly, and then also involved in helping us advocate for more money in the coming years for the voucher. The other piece is to oppose the HUD cuts, right? So, I talked a little bit before about Trump's skinny budget, which, proposed 44% cuts to HUD, which again would be absolutely catastrophic for the housing infrastructure in New York. The House and the Senate markups in appropriations are not as catastrophic, but they still have cuts, right? Particularly like the emergency housing voucher that's not included in either of those. There's cuts to COC funding and HOPWA, housing funding for people living with HIV and AIDS. So there's still significant cuts there that are going to have an impact on housing in New York City. HAVP can help to offset that a little bit, but really, we want to make sure that folks in Washington understand what, if they vote for these cuts, they're going to have a real catastrophic impact on homelessness in New York. And then I would just say, elevate the human impact of homelessness. Making sure to, elevate voices of people with lived experience wherever you can to make sure that this isn't just a statistic, it's not just a number. Like real people are impacted by these policy choices every day, and we just have to really remind people of that. So I'll leave it there, and I guess we'll open it up to Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris and Rhonda. It's very informative. It's a lot more things that a lot of moving parts, and thank you so much for doing the advocacy that you've been doing to make sure that people do have a place to live, and I really appreciate that. Uh, we have some questions. Let's start with our first one. And could one of the, well, let me put that in a better phrasing. What the 50 AMI cutoff would be for a single adult, if someone could touch on that.
That is a good question. I think I think it's probably around $50,000 a year, but I will double check on that.
Alrighty.
Uh, yeah, so for a single adult, 50% AMI is 56,700.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next question. What is Section 9?
Great question. And yeah, sorry, I feel like in the housing world, there's just an insane number of acronyms. So Section 9 is the funding that pays for um, housing like NYCHA, so for public housing. So um, that's the yeah. So that's the funding. Section 8 is money that can be used like on an individual can take that money and find their own apartment, but Section 9 just pays for like a public housing project.
Thank you. Next question. How will this program be sustained, funded through the state?
Yeah, I think when you look at the actual cost of $50 million is really a drop in the bucket. It's less than 1% of the state's budget. I think yeah, so it's just even a fraction of 1%. So the state budget is over $200 billion a year. So we're talking about um, you know, a comparatively small program. Even at 250 million, you're talking about, around 1% of or less than 1% of the budget.
All right. Next question. Um, could you say how many vouchers have been issued statewide and for how many years? And I'll add the second question after you answer the first.
So no vouchers have been issued yet, right? So like we just got this funding in the legislative session that ended in June. And so the first vouchers will be issued starting in 2026, in March 2026. So that's why right now is a really critical time in terms of being able to ensure that this is implemented correctly. We can work with our partners at the state, at HDC to make sure that this is rolled out correctly.
All right. Next question. How does one go about applying for HAVP? And is this a subsidy only tailored to DHS contracted shelters, or is it open to other transitional housing programs as well?
Yeah, a great question. So it's not just for DHS programs. So because it's administered through the public housing authorities, um, that's where you'll go to apply for the Housing Access Voucher Program. So um, again, as we work out the details of implementation, these are going to be like important questions and important things that we're raising. So, you know, as I said before, this is available to folks regardless of immigration status. It's available to people regardless of, past criminal justice involvement. Um, but the devil is in the details, and how we set up the actual process for applying will determine how well those groups are actually able to access the voucher, and that's why we have to keep advocating over the next several months to ensure that it is rolled out in an equitable way.
Next question, is SSI or SSDI considered income in the bill?
Yeah, but I think for someone on SSI or SSDI, their income's going to be lower than the 50% AMI if that's their only source of income. If they have some other source of income, that will factor in. But for anyone that's just their sole source of income is SSI or SSDI, like they will absolutely qualify for the voucher under the income requirements.
Excellent. Our next question is reiterating that the application process will be starting March 2026, or are you expecting the first batch of vouchers to be issued in the beginning of March 2026?
Yeah, the first vouchers will be given in 2026.
Okay. Our next question is, how are you able to advocate for this voucher to cover regardless of immigration status? And will there be any population considerations for allocation?
I think part of that was the coalition that we built, right? Like this was important to coalition members. And one of the things that we agreed on as a coalition is, we were willing to negotiate on the dollar amount for the program, but we weren't willing to negotiate on populations. So, if they had come and they had tried to say, we'll pass HAVP at 250 million, but immigrants are out, we would have, walked away from that negotiation. And so by kind of as a coalition agreeing on where we stood, I think we were able to, be strong in our position and our messaging, and that helped to ensure that no populations were left out.
Thank you for that. Another follow-up question. Can employees sign up for Housing Access NY, or must it be the leadership or individual organizations?
That's a good question. I mean, individuals can sign up on their own, right? So, if you're signing up for your organization, you know, I would say you would need to get organizational backing. But if you don't have that, but you still want to get involved, you can get involved on an individual level. Absolutely.
Our next question is, when should we expect the application process to begin? Knowing that it's March 2026, when do you think the application will begin being live?
That is a good question. I expect hopefully it'll be March 1st, 2026. So like I think those first vouchers will be um, essentially go live, become available, and I think at that time that's when folks will be able to start applying for those vouchers as well.
Okay. Our next question is, what are the possibilities for adding a group to the eligible list? For instance, many tenants in supportive housing have no way of moving to private housing, even though supportive housing is inappropriate for them. How can they advocate to be added to the eligible list?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I used to be a program director in supportive housing, and I can I feel the frustration there in the challenge of helping someone transition from supportive housing when they really can kind of um, access housing on their own without the same levels of support. That's a good question. I don't have a great answer for that at the moment. But I think, something that, as we're thinking about implementation and things like that, this is a good time to raise questions like that and think through how we might be able to address that moving forward.
Next question, in regards to oversight for the programs in regards to PHA.
Like oversight of the public housing authorities, like who
I
is,
believe so.
um, yeah, I mean, I think the oversight that exists will come from HDC, and they're kind of the um, the body that's also going to help with implementation.
Next question, given the volume of applications for such a small window of Section 8 in June 2024, do you expect there to be a lottery?
That's a good question. There may be, because it's a small, a relatively small number of vouchers. Um, but I think, again, this is something that will be determined um, as we think through implementation, right? So like, how is it going to be implemented, especially like at the beginning in the most fair way possible, right? There may be some, you know, um, subset of eligibility requirements that are added to make it slightly more targeted or something like that. Um, just with the limited number that are out there. But there's also a level of flexibility in the individual public housing authorities. So the individual public housing authorities, for instance, in the bill, they can there's it doesn't say exactly how many of the vouchers can or should be used for prevention. So like helping people stay in their homes versus helping people move out of shelter. So there's some level of flexibility there at the individual PHA level. But I think, it's also critical that, um, the HCR actually spells this out a little bit more clearly. So yeah, and HCR is Homes and Community Renewal. So that agency is the overseeing the rollout of HAVP.
And we have our last question. Need clarification on how to refer a client and to know if they can be referred to this program, and also try other options, public housing wait lists, such as city FEPs.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So like right now, you can apply for Section 8, right? You can be on the Section 8 wait list and also apply for city FEPs. Because Section 8 wait list, you can be on it for 20 years, right? So if everyone that needs a voucher is waiting for Section 8, 75% of those people are going to be waiting a very long time. So, I think that, for someone that might be able to get city FEPs, right? Like I think again, this is a determination that has to be made in the implementation discussion is like, is this a voucher of last resort, for instance, right? Like, so if you didn't qualify for Section 8, you didn't qualify for city FEPs, is it that group of people that then can utilize P? I'm not saying that is what it's going to be. I'm just saying like that is, a, a a possibility, and something that again still needs to be worked out. So there, as you can see, there's a lot of question marks around implementation. But I think, that really highlights how important it is that we stay active in advocacy around the implementation to ensure that HAVP lives up to the promise that it's designed for.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you everybody for attending. Yeah, I'm sorry for all the hiccups. There's a lot of rain going on, a lot of a little bit of disconnects on our end. But if you don't mind, if anybody could just please answer these 4 questions, just get our sense of how everybody's feeling. And allow me to also add some upcoming trainings to the chat. Also, just for adding for clarification, we will be providing all this information in the coming week. So you'll have access to the slides and all the information. And if you do need any other information, just please feel free to let us know. But yes, thank you so much, Rhonda and Chris. I really do appreciate your time. And hopefully we could get more of the advocacy rollout. I'm hoping to see more waves as we go along. We try to stay positive, but thank you for all the work you've been doing so far. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry for the hiccups. It's the rain.
Yeah.
I think
Thanks so much, Rhonda. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.